When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow.
Welcome to the OShow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. And it's time that we got the boys back because, man, is there a lot going on in our country. There was a scandalous meeting that took place at Mar-a-Lago where 3 Canadians, 2 of them who aren't even elected, felt like they could go down and, I don't know, talk to the incoming tyrant-in-chief, Trump, about what Canada's worth or how to deal with our trade war. Hardly the Team Canada approach that we need. I have a lot to say about the Peterson Smith O'Leary meeting, and I'm sure the guys do too. But since this is the OShow scandal panel, I never tell them what's on the agenda because Mark Cripps, who was, of course, working within the ministry in Ontario on housing, he knows a lot about what he talks. He's got his own ideas. He was also a publisher at one time. And so, he's a journalist tracking stuff. We've also got Keith Leslie, who was the Queen's Park reporter. He is a journalist that is widely respected across this country. And so we always start the scandal panel with going to Keith. But just before I do that, I want to thank everybody who's watching this podcast and subscribing it, sharing our clips across socials, and of course, listening wherever you get your great podcasts, because the numbers that the OShow is getting now are in the hundreds of thousands in clips, and the downloads on YouTube are taking off. This is a national conversation. I can't think of a more critical time to be having the conversation. And for all of you who are new to the pod, this is independent. Nobody's paying for it, so we can say whatever the hell we want. Okay, Keith Leslie, Queen's Park reporter, legendary. Let's go. What would you like to bring up on the docket for the scandal panel today?
Well, before we get to the trip to Mar-a-Lago, let's talk about Captain Canada, Doug Ford. I mean, he's put on this new mantle now, and he just happens. I mean, he's really locked into this. It's a rotating chair of the Provincial Premiers Council of the Federation. Happens to be his year. Happens to be the federal government has collapsed. We have a leadership vacuum in Ottawa, and we have to take on Trump's threatened 25% tariffs across the board. Mm-hmm. Doug Ford's looking like and saying all the right things. He's standing up tough on American talk shows. He's he played the whole 51st state thing pretty clearly, pretty well, I thought. Yeah. And then walking into Wednesday's First Ministers meeting with the hat, mm-hmm. Canada is not for sale. That's Trump to Trump kind of messaging right there. Yeah. Now, there should have been a bracket on the back, but you can get 99-year leases on some chunk parts. But we'll let that go for now. That was, quite frankly, a masterstroke. I mean, I know we're the scandal panel, but Doug Ford has been playing this really well.
Keith, so well. I gotta tell you, I complimented Ford publicly for that hat because of exactly what you said. Yes. I'll give props where props are due. If he wasn't failing the province of Ontario so horrifically, I'd give him more props. But on that hat, that marketing thing from an ad guy, a marketing guy who ran a sign company, it was a master move. I agree. Go on, Keith.
No, but that positioned him, and it's just even when you saw at the First Ministers meeting when they came out with almost a united front, except for Danielle Smith who went to Mar-a-Lago, but we'll get back to that. And you see Ford, and the Prime Minister was asked. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who we know is resigning and is waiting for a new Liberal leader, he was asked directly, well, how can you have a united Canada front when you've got Premier Smith saying that, you can't have oil and gas on the table, we're not a united front on that? And the Prime Minister went, Doug, would you like to handle this? Yeah. Boom. And he did handle it. And he called her out. He said, country comes first. And this is her opinion, but right now everything has to be on the table, all sorts of things that would hurt other provinces in different ways. And so for her not to have the united front, especially after her coming away with that actual FaceTime with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, taken there by Kevin O'Leary, his invite apparently got her there. And anyway, she's the only premier that's had FaceTime other than Monsieur Legault had a couple of minutes with him early on in France. So right now, it's a strange positioning. What do we do? And yet we're seeing Doug Ford. He's able to fill the void coming in as I say, Captain Canada. And it's garnering all the media attention. And at this time of year, it's garnering all the public's attention pretty much too, because the media is so focused on it. So all the other issues that we would normally be leading off with and talking about, for example, the report that over 81,000 people in Ontario are homeless and in encampments. and that number could double within 5 years or quadruple if there's a recession. Those things are scary. Did you see the video of the people lined up in I think the
Walkerton.
Yeah, for a doctor, for a freaking
for a doctor, to line up for a doctor, and they're lined up in the freezing cold, standing in the snow, just in hopes of getting a doctor. One guy in line said, "Oh, I've been on the wait list 10 years, and I'm just hoping we get one this time." But even he said it's a hell of a way to sign up for a doctor. Everybody lined up outside in January. All these emergency rooms have got 90% or 90 people more than admitted than they can put anywhere in the hallways, ambulance bays. All these sorts of issues are absolutely still worse. They're getting worse day by day. They're not being addressed the way they should be. The teachers tell you stuff about schools. There's all these other issues that we need to be focused on. But right now, the country is focused on what Donald Trump has set the agenda for everybody pretty much around the world right now, certainly for our country to have to deal with. And with the leadership vacuum in Ottawa, Doug Ford has stepped right into it. I mean, as I say, partly was this role he was given as the chair of the Council of Federation, but he looks good doing it. And he's saying the kind of things that most Canadians do because he speaks Trump's language.
Yep.
You hit me hard, I hit you harder. You know it's
yeah, it was good.
It's not the kind of communication stuff you would advise, but for him, it works.
No, it is. It is when your audience is Trump and Trump's people. I mean, of course, he's speaking their language. I applaud that. That's why I have given him some props for his Captain Canada. Now, if he wasn't so horrible as a premier of Ontario, with a majority 6 years failed our province, driven many more people into homelessness, he has eviscerated our healthcare system. He has done damage to our public education system. And don't even get me started on all of the money that he has wasted on secret spa deals and on the Greenbelt scandal. And we'll get into the fact that he's got to reveal, according to a court, what's on his secret phones, all those burner phones or whatever the hell they were using around the Greenbelt scandal. So Doug Ford is mired in scandal. We're not going to let him off the hook. And just because he plays Captain Canada well, doesn't mean he should be reelected as the Premier of Ontario. That being said, I've been advocating for a Team Canada approach. And so if he's leading the premiers and he's doing it in the most cohesive way possible, despite Danielle Smith and whatever the hell she's up to, credit for that. But it's not going to take my eye off the ball of what's happening here in Ontario. And I just want to push back on one thing you said there, Keith. Yeah, Doug Ford getting lots of spotlight on the national conversation that is obsessing this country, as it should. But when Mark Carney did the Daily Show interview the other night, I have not seen so much social media traffic organically explode. Like I'm talking on Threads, Blue Sky, Twitter, or X, Facebook, even on LinkedIn. Hundreds and hundreds of comments. You know, people are absolutely engaged in a visceral way with the Carney campaign, which at the time of this taping and this show, he still hasn't done his public launch in Edmonton. But I think Doug Ford lost the national spotlight when Carney introduced himself. We'll talk more about that. Mark, how do you want to start off?
I was glad Keith brought up the Doug Ford performance because I couldn't help but think exactly the same thing last night watching the coverage of the First Minister's conference. Trump is an absolute gift to Doug Ford and his election prospects and if you live in Ontario and you watch TV, you will know that the PCs are running nonstop Doug Ford ads. And it's not about the party. It's about Doug Ford getting it done for the people. So I would think that Doug should send Donald Trump a gift basket because he has been an absolute miracle for Doug's election prospects. And I think we are on the precipice of an election here in Ontario. I think Doug is going to run on Captain Canada, Captain Ontario, and it's going to make all of the stuff that you just talked about, Laura, you know, the shit show that has been the last 6 years, go away because everyone's fixated on this one issue right now. Everybody's fixated on Donald Trump, which is what the narcissist wants, right? This is what he is all about. Everybody look at me. Everybody look at me. And
but how can we not? He's threatening to effectively
100%.
throw our country into a giant recession and threaten our sovereignty, which I've been saying for months. He's not kidding around. If he can take Canada one way or another, he's going to.
But what I really, you know, one nugget that caught me last week was when Doug said, I need a mandate to have to maybe potentially spend, I think he said $40 billion to offset the tariffs. And I thought to myself, I mean, we've got $40 billion to spend on offsetting Trump tariffs, but we don't have $100,000 to help homeless people or everything else going on in this province. And I just thought, that really struck me. And with everything going on in the background with Doug, the cell phone records, which they are, the most transparent government in the history of the world. And yet they're fighting transparency over and over again and costing the taxpayers money and threatening the whole process of freedom of information, which is a cornerstone of democracy. And I'm almost certain that the timing of the election call is to get ahead of the RCMP investigation into the Greenbelt. I mean, all the cards are in his hand right now, and they're all coming up a royal flush. And I just don't see anything stopping their reelection right now. I just don't.
You know what? I've heard from some strange birdies about that same conclusion, and I won't get into it because I think it wasn't meant for public consumption. But yeah, I've seen nothing that would indicate that Doug is not fully leveraging this crisis. And you know what? If he can protect our economy in Ontario and protect our country in his current position, then have at. Right. But that's not going to change 1 ounce about his own record here in Ontario. And he should be pursued by the RCMP for the Greenbelt investigation. I'd like to hear an update on that year-long investigation they launched. And his feet should be held to the fire because he can't let all these other issues fall away just because he's getting the big spotlight. But let's add a little note of positive here. I think that a lot of the OShow audience, they might not be partisan like I'm not, but I certainly am somebody who does not want fascism, does not want right-wing rising in Canada for a million reasons. And I think that we were looking at the double barrels of a negative Trump presidency, whatever that is, I'll leave that, a negative Trump presidency where we'd hear nothing but threats and demeaning language and bullshit constantly, like we did back in the day, only worse now because he's unfettered. He has all the power. I, as a Canadian, was dreading having to listen to Pierre Poilievre at the same time, having to listen to another person who is small-minded and vindictive and nasty and negative. I couldn't imagine handling both of that, guys. And honestly, since the Carney announcement, I think that Poilievre's majority is slipping away. I think for once, in the first time in 5 years, Canadians who might be blue liberals or red-blue Tories or centrists or whatever are saying, you know what, Jagmeet Singh didn't rise to the occasion, didn't show leadership, wanted to have it both ways. He's not a choice. Trudeau and that whole regime and their legacy, not working for me. Poilievre looked like the only possibility. People were going to, give him a little check mark, but do it with gritted teeth and a sense of buyer's remorse. Now they're looking at Carney going, if he is a centrist and if he is respected and if he can help our economy and if he can stand up for our sovereignty and put Canada back on the map as a serious country, what the hell? That's where I'm at, guys. Like these are exceptional times. I don't care if he ran for the Conservatives, I'd probably vote for Carney. I'm just saying the guy looks like he's the man of the moment. Keith?
Absolutely. I mean, he had a brilliant showing on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. And not only that, I mean, I'm going to complain as a Canadian reporter. He didn't do a Canadian interview first. I don't believe he still has. But on the other hand, you do the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and he had Jon Stewart now on the other hosts. He held his own with Jon Stewart. He was funny. He was good at times. It was a breakup scenario. And he said, it's not you, it's us. Brilliant. Even if someone else wrote that for him, brilliantly delivered. I mean, just reading the room like that, it was very good to see. Despite
and keeping it going for 20 minutes.
Oh yeah, there was
the sexual undertones. How do you do that in a political interview? It was incredible. It was so fun.
Well, he immediately what he did there was shatter this bullshit myth that he's Ignatieff just as stiff as Iggy was. Not even close. That was my take. It was holy cow, not even close.
Right.
Despite that outstanding performance and the stroke of genius of going on that show, because you're going to get more Canadian eyeballs than you would on any other Canadian show that you did.
Yep.
So again, no loss there. You got the world's attention, basically, or certainly all of North America paying attention to what he was doing there. I still don't think, as good as he was, that the Liberals have a chance in hell of getting elected, even if he does become leader. I just don't see it. The numbers are just too far ahead. I know Poilievre is off-putting to an awful lot of people, but I think he's going to start, and he's going to have to start soon, tacking away from that hard-edge, antagonistic, always just, chomping at the apple, spitting in your face sort of thing, and talking about his policies and what he's going to do, maybe even, God forbid, address climate change somehow, some way. But I think the best thing that Carney and, of course, Freeland as well, they're likely to be the final two on the ballot. Both of them have to say that the carbon tax is dead, that it was of its time. The consumer-based carbon tax has to be limited. They can't campaign in Canada on that tax, and it immediately they have to take away this whole nonsense, axe the tax, carbon tax, Carney, all that. They have to diffuse that. What will that do to Poilievre? What will that do to the Conservative campaign? Because it was all based on Trudeau and the tax. Well, if you take the tax away and Trudeau's gone, and you get someone like Carney, it's a fighting chance. I'm not going to say it couldn't happen, but the numbers are still so high for the Conservatives that especially if they get the election, the new Prime Minister is going to be in office, 2, 4, 6 weeks maybe, and has to hit the campaign trail. Justin Trudeau hurt them by dragging it out way past. Even when when Freeland resigned as finance, it should have been that. Okay, at least then it was before Christmas. People could think about things. Or no, they're dragging it all out.
Yeah, I agree. So I agree with you, Keith. I agree with you that I didn't want Trudeau to pull a Biden. I begged, I pleaded for months. Like, let's go. It's over. Yeah. So let's give her or whoever a chance, Christie or whoever else. But here's a couple of things that I think changed the calculus for me, and it's not because I'm being, Pollyannic or wish casting. We haven't seen a poll that has Carney up against Poilievre. So to me, everything is brand new again. Mm-hmm. Secondly, Pierre kind of held back a little bit with his slogans and his trash talk on social when Carney announced. I noticed it got a little quieter on that front, but then put out a tax policy today. And I tweeted something last night that said, you know what, when your sink is broken, hire a plumber. When your economy, or rather when your sink needs fixing, hire a plumber. When your economy needs fixing, hire an economist, right? Like, Carney makes sense in this moment. And so when Poilievre put out his new tax proposal, I said, I'll wait to hear from the economist. Do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have the high ground on fixing this economy. He doesn't have the statesmanship high ground because Trump already heard his name in a press conference and kind of dismissed him out of hand. So he is not looking like the man of the moment. And depending on what Carney brings on the table, if he can repeat his performance on The Daily Show and continue to seem like the adult in the room, I think at least they should be gunning to hold Poilievre to a minority, which is fine. Just, I don't want a majority power going to a guy who doesn't have his top level security clearance. It makes no sense when our country is under threat to have a majority go to a guy who refuses to get top level security clearance. So Poilievre doesn't have Trudeau to yell about anymore. He is not the best ideas guy on the economy with Carney in the race. And I think that he is off-putting on his personal brand. And I'm not sure he can fix that by just trying to be less nasty. I think we see that. Women certainly see that in the way that he talks to women reporters. So is he going to erase decades of being who he is to try to be more affable and appeal to centrist Canadians now? He might try, but I think a lot of this has to do with what the Carney campaign has in mind. Mark?
I couldn't agree with you more, Laura. I think we're going to see a huge shift back to the Liberals. I think Carney may save the Liberals from decimation. Right. I don't know if it's going to save them from losing the next election, but, he's going to, that profile will help him in opposition. It'll give them, look, the road is going to be tough for whoever governs in the next 4 years. And, I think at the end of the day, the polls reflect a hatred for Trudeau, not necessarily a hatred for the Liberals in general. Look, the reality is the Liberals have been governing for, you can't be prime minister in this country for more than 6 years. I just don't think it. You look at Harper. Everybody hated Harper when he left. Everybody hated Trudeau. Everybody hated Mulroney. It's the cycle of, people just want to blame somebody for something, and the prime minister is a perfect person to blame because it's just so easy. But I feel like, in this moment, I've talked to people. I know some people who are conservatives who are trying to push me on. We're worried about Christy Clark. She's our biggest threat. And I was like, no, you guys, give me a freaking break. Your
She's
biggest
not.
threat is Mark
Screwed up.
Carney, and
But
you
he
know it.
screwed up. I mean, I sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, I don't want to waste time on someone who's out of the game already.
Yeah.
This is why we support journalism here on the Show, folks. CBC caught her and she dropped out of the race. So so in 1 week, we had a Liberal leadership candidate get caught on a TV interview, do terribly, and is out of the race. And we had another person, a Liberal outsider, do a TV interview, nailed it so well that now he's trending all over the place, Mark Carney. So, I mean, the media matters. Interviews matter. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no, I think, so I think what we will see, a couple things that I think are in play here. I know Keith said, and you said that you think there's going to be an election right after the leadership race. I'm not convinced that's necessarily true. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the NDP internally and from their own constituency to keep the Liberals in power, to not hand the reins over at this juncture, because I think the NDP will be massively blamed for triggering an election. And that will actually hurt them more than it'll help them. Jagmeet's already very unpopular in terms of a leader. People want him gone. So that's why I think he's going to have to fall on the sword. I think there's going to be pressure on him to let Carney have a little bit of a chance to balance the sort of the political landscape, to give, I know it sounds like, well, they'd be helping the Liberals. We're in a really challenging time right now. And if you're an NDP supporter and you think it's a good idea to just trigger an election and give Pierre the keys to Parliament, I mean, that could actually trigger a lot of NDP support, strategic voting over to the Liberals. I think Carney, I don't think it's going to be anything.
I'm already seeing that, Mark. I'm already seeing people online posting how to sign up to the Liberal Party to vote for Carney who are NDPers.
I know people who hate Trudeau, but said to me, if Mark Carney was the leader, I would vote Liberal. And this was like months ago. Months ago, people were saying this to me. So, I mean, this is a game changer in terms of Canadian politics. And I feel like, I don't know, if I want someone negotiating with Donald Trump, do I want Slogan Boy? Or do I want the former head of the Bank of Canada, the former head of the Bank of England, somebody with actual experience versus a guy whose only other job was a paper boy?
Right.
You're going to put a paper boy up against Donald Trump? Give me a break. People are going to start.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's hard to counter the time for change, right? That's what the Liberals are up against now. What all Canadians? It's time for change is what people feel.
Yeah.
And I'll give credit to that great Canadian Rick Mercer who came up with, or I first heard him say it was, Canadians view their government like that box of baking soda at the back of the fridge. You put it in there, forget about it until it begins to stink, then you throw it out. And that's what we're in the process of doing, is either throwing out a government or maybe re-electing a new one. But if Trudeau's gone, we're now left with, well, then if you're still mad about all the Trudeau government stuff, you're wanting to get rid of that government. That's it's that time for change number, which we all know is the hardest thing for any politician to overcome, or any political party. So say with Trudeau gone, maybe Carney can turn that around. That's going to be the thing. As you say, we need to see some polls with Mark Carney up against Pierre Poilievre. And again, the more Carney gets known by Canadians, just that one little glimpse. I never really saw the man speak before.
Yeah.
Just that one little glimpse. And to show how worried somebody is about him, the next day there's a picture of him, which is Elaine Maxwell.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
Now, is that Liberal Party infighting, or is that the Conservatives? The Conservatives say, well, hey, it wasn't us, like pointing as if this is Liberal Party infighting. I don't know.
It was published in the National Post. We all know where that's coming from.
Well, guys, listen, I can only speak to my direct data analysis of my social feeds that I've been getting. And it's not Liberal Party infighting that is going at me
no,
about Carney. And so every kind of conspiracy, every kind of stupid meme image, every kind of thing, and even Poilievre, the best he came up with at 6:12 yesterday or 3:50 p.m. or whatever he put it out was it's 3:50 p.m. and blah blah blah, and he had a slogan for Carney, a 3-word slogan, and I'm like, really? That's all you got? Another 3-word slogan? Is this how you think you're gonna fight this battle? I don't think that they know what to do with themselves from all the kitchen sink and everything in the kitchen sink they've thrown at the messaging wall at me in the last 48 hours. They're all over their map. They are freaking out. And they've been positioning against Carney for months and months and months because they knew he would be the problem if he got into the race. And now that he did so well in his opening, I think he caught them flat-footed on this. They don't know what to do. So we're seeing everything. They're going to throw everything. They're going to try everything. But let's also not forget, guys, that Ontario, big vote grab for the federal election. If Doug Ford decides opportunistically to seize Captain Canada moment and have a snap election now in Ontario, what's that going to do to the calculus about bringing in a conservative government federally? Because traditionally, if we've got a conservative running Ontario, a lot of people say, nope, got to have some balance here. So I think that Ford, in this Captain Canada role, is hurting Poilievre's reelection. I mean, to me, everything went out the door, all the previous stuff. When Trump won the election and Trudeau quit, it's a reset of the table in this country. We are now fighting for our freaking sovereignty, and we are fighting for an economy strong enough to stand up against Trump's trade war and whatever hell he will wrought on this world. So we need to know that we have a leadership team federally that is going to be able to tackle this. And I just think that Poilievre, if I was doing a situational analysis, crisis analysis for his team, I would be like, you got a lot of problems coming at us that we didn't have 5 months ago. So I'm not looking at any poll that doesn't factor in Carney on the ticket and the Trump threats to our national sovereignty and the need for a serious prime minister going forward. Mark?
I'm not sure Ford actually likes Pierre. I don't think they're that tight. Secondly, I would just say that if I'm Doug Ford, I want this Liberal government to last a bit longer because I want to call my election. So if I'm Doug Ford, I'm calling an election in or around the end of March, early April. I will drop the writ, which will force the federal conservatives will not be able to run they will not be able to bring down the government because they need all those resources, all those boots on the ground, all those organizers, everybody else to run their campaign in Ontario. If Ontario is the prize, if Ontario is going to turn the tide for Pierre, they're not going to call an election at the same time or force an election at the same time. So if I'm Doug, I'm thinking my time to go is early April. I want the Liberals to stay in power. And I also think one thing that's going to help the polling or whatever, the next 2 months, the focus is going to be on the Liberal leadership race. All the news stories, everything, all the focus is going to be on Liberal, and Trump, right? Yep. So that's what's going to be in the window for people, voters to see. It's like you said, it's a huge reset moment and I believe you'll see a dramatic change in the polling. I'm not saying, again, that the Liberals have a chance to win. I think that Keith may be right that it's too far gone, but I think they can save the party. They can save potentially an opposition role, give Carney a chance to show his mettle, to be the foil, to be the adult in the room against the absolute child, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I have to say that as Canada is watching, it's up to Carney's team to build a permission structure for people, soft Poilievre voters, to move over, right? Yeah. That's what it's about. That's the game at play, is create a permission structure for all those people who are going to vote for Poilievre but hold their nose to vote for Carney, to say, you know what, I don't hold the Liberal Party as an entity responsible for Trudeau. But guys, before we get to Mar-a-Lago, because I got something to say about that. I just want to touch on who we haven't talked about. We mentioned her in brief. I thought it was going to be a clash of the titans between Carney and Freeland, but two things happened. Freeland sent that letter, which I thought was a good tactic if you wanted to burn Trudeau, but a bad tactic if you wanted to position to lead the country. And you've also got Carney outperforming anybody's expectations on The Daily Show. So does Freeland, she posted yesterday her sitting at her desk and over the shoulder shot, drinking multiple cups of tea and making phone calls. Didn't look like a power positioning to me after what happened with Carney. I don't think she's going to have really a serious chance of getting the nomination or the leadership. What do you think, Keith?
I never did. I think as a finance minister, it's a tough transition to become prime minister because you're held responsible for all the fiscal decisions, which if you're a government of 10 years in, they're not all going to be popular ones. There's just no two ways about it. So I thought she was going to run, but I always thought she was not a great retail politician, quite frankly. She's very smart, good finance minister, good cabinet minister all the way around, I think. But for the most part, I did not see her as a party leader. I just didn't. So I think Carney coming in is really going to hurt her chances, although I still think it's down to her and him. But there's no way she can distance herself from the Trudeau government other than that letter of December 16th, I believe was the date. Whereas Carney, and we saw him very coyly, play that, admit he's going to campaign as an outsider. Well, what if I wasn't a member of cabinet? What if I wasn't, even though he was an economic advisor and had done a number of things with the Liberals, for goodness sakes, he's godfather to one of Chrystia Freeland's children. I mean, he is pretty tight with the Liberal circles. There's no two ways about it, but he's going to campaign as an outsider. And that's their only fighting chance, I think, right now, is to be the outsider. Okay, you want to get rid of that government. I'm not that government. I'm not going to do a carbon tax. I'm going to have some very different policies, and I can take on Donald Trump because I know this world better than he certainly does. I think it's a good pitch. I think it's a good help for them. But I think as well that you're right about Doug Ford wanting the federal Liberal government to last a little longer so he could go now, which it's got me thinking that he's not as inclined to go now. That because of the Captain Canada stuff and he's wearing it well and enjoying it, he's also been pointing to the political vacuum in Ottawa. So for him, in the midst of a political vacuum in Ottawa, to go for an Ontario election just a year earlier, a year and 14, 16 months early, to bolster his own chances, that's where you might piss people off. That's where the danger comes in. And so he's trying to cash in on the Captain Canada. Voters aren't stupid. They know there's a lot else going on. So I think there's that. I originally thought March 27th was going to be the Ontario election date, or at least the calling of it by then. Now I'm not so sure. I think there's some hesitation again now. But another factor we didn't discuss and why he would want to go now is because Bonnie Crombie still has no traction. Yeah. So, giving her another year to get somewhere, I don't know how much it's going to help her. But right now, I do think Ford he's thinking nationally. He goes on his own gut instinct. He's not like Trump, who's the last person in his ear. I think he really weighs these decisions over on his own and after counsel makes his own decisions. And I think right now, he's leaning away. Just my take, I have no inside knowledge on this, but my take is that he's leaning away from it right now to stay in the other role, which is working so well for him. And it's such a distraction from all the problems he normally gets asked about every day. They're just not happening. He's dealing with this.
Unless he needs the excuse of the $1 billion of expenditure to stave off the impact of Trump's tariffs, right? That's what accelerates that window for the Ontario election, from my point of view, is that he's got an easy ballot question. Do you want to fight these tariffs? If so, empower me to do it. So that's the only thing there. And also, you know what? I think he knows that Poilievre's in trouble with Carney. So if Poilievre fights Carney and is reduced to a minority, and then Doug can be the big savior, Captain Canada for the Conservative Party, right? Like, I think that's the long game on that. Because I want to pivot here to the Mar-a-Lago visit, because in all my years on LinkedIn, and I'll admit it's not a platform I've spent a lot of time on, I've never seen anything like the response to my post decrying what Kevin O'Leary has said publicly. And on the OShow, I don't make it personal with people who aren't elected, elected officials. That's part of what you sign up for. But O'Leary and Peterson aren't elected officials at this stage, no matter how they might be presenting themselves to Trump or whatever they are doing. I don't know. But he did say publicly that Canada is 41 million people sitting on all the resources, right, that America wants or needs or whatever. The language, and I'm a geek, but the language of that, we're sitting. We're not standing strong, proud, true north and free. Mm-hmm. We're just sitting on top of the real value. The people are incidental in the real value of Canada, which is our precious minerals, our water, whatever, underneath our butts. That to me is so highly offensive. It filled me with such incredible rage that I didn't even know how to articulate it. It's the idea of saying, you know what, that's what you want to buy, and we'll throw in the 41 million people as a bonus. It's as though we are nothing but some sort of a product that can be thrown around in a negotiation that I don't think anybody but our prime minister and our United premier should even be having with the incoming president of the United States. So forget the fact that the meeting, I thought, was gross and undermined our national unity in just having it. I mean, Danielle Smith, if she wants to do that and break with her colleagues, she can do that. She's an elected official. I really don't care. I really do care, though, about I mean, I don't like her breaking with her colleagues, but she can go down and visit him if she wants. The idea of people who are not elected making some kind of a deal for an economic union with Canada, I think is gross. And I'm not going to go so far as to use some of the other labels for O'Leary and the others, as I've heard out there, because I wasn't actually in the meetings, but I'm just speaking about the public remarks that were made. And the idea that we're 41 million people sitting on top of like real value makes me insane. I'm highly offended. It makes me feel vulnerable as a nation. And I think we need to speak out against it. If we can't position the fact that it's the Canadians, it's all of us, we Canadians are the value of this country. Our land is magnificent, and we should protect it and preserve it. And absolutely, we should export what we can. But don't ever put me in a negotiation as though I'm an add-on to what's there, because I'm a fucking Canadian, and I'm more than the ground.
This is how the oligarchs view the world.
That's right.
That people are just, as you say, either product or consumer. They want to have all this extra influence. They don't want to have any rules and regulations. And I believe President Biden mentioned that very thing in his final speech from the Oval Office, warning about the technocrat society that we're heading into with artificial intelligence, the oligarchy. And we're absolutely there. Who are the top three donors to Trump's inauguration festivities? They would be Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff
Bezos.
Do they control any media? They control everything. They're controlling the messaging. Oh, by the way, we don't no more content control on video. We just have community nodes. All of this stuff, it's an oligarch's world, and they're going to want more changes, more tax breaks, more stuff going their way. And to your Canada, yeah. I mean, what more do you people want? For goodness sakes, we offered to make you a state. We'll let you. And that one American anchor he literally, you could tell he thought, why wouldn't you want that? They really, I think, firmly believe Trump's bullshit to the point of why wouldn't anyone want to be an American?
Right.
Well, and we won't go down healthcare, guns, and all this sort of stuff. It's just that whole mindset, that whole thing. That's how billionaires view the world. Their loss of humanity, I think, comes with the fourth or fifth house. And then they have no relation to anybody anymore other than their employees. And you don't want to make eye contact with all those people and their employees. They really are so detached from the world. And now here they've got a president-elect, be president in a couple of days, who's just willing to let them have access to his ear, right? Just come right in. And we all know he's very influenced by the last person he spoke to. This is scary, dangerous stuff. And these billionaires are positioning themselves just to be at his side. Apparently, Musk moved into an even bigger bungalow at Mar-a-Lago because he's closer now, more immediate access. What the hell is this all about? These people weren't elected to anything and never would be, for goodness sakes.
I think, one of the things that struck me about, let's for all intents and purposes, Kevin O'Leary is not a Canadian. He's been living in the United States for forever. He's not a Canadian, and everything for him.
No, he technically is. So I'm
whatever.
Not
but he's his world is in the United States.
Sure.
What I think people need to keep their eye on the ball here is that, what struck me about Danielle Smith going to Mar-a-Lago without telling anybody, which I think is completely unprofessional. I understand. I get it. Alberta is the new Quebec, really, in terms of Canadian unity, because they feel like they're the odd person out. They feel they've been a bridge. Everything is, everybody's against Alberta, and it's simply not true. It's a complete fabrication. But Danielle Smith going there without telling anybody, cozying up with O'Leary, this rhetoric about 51st state, about Canada, about resources is really going to seed, I think, and this is my greatest fear, is seeding a national unity crisis in Canada. And I think that the Canadian concept needs a champion. And I'm not sure it's, I don't see it as being Poilievre. That's my own personal opinion. But I think that like in the next 4 years, if Danielle Smith gets her way, what's stopping her from saying, you know what?
Nothing.
I'm done with Canada. I'd rather be part of the United States.
Absolutely.
Let's start the process. Or what happens with Quebec now seizing the opportunity, Quebec separatists seizing the opportunity for a disunity in the Canadian structure, all being, and I think Leary knows this, Trump knows this. If they see discord in our own unity,
Yep.
They'll create a crisis that will ultimately end on us agreeing to some kind of, oh, please save us from ourselves. Like we want to be unified. Like, it's absolutely dangerous, irresponsible rhetoric
Yep.
for these people to be doing. And Danielle Smith, and that's what I loved about Doug yesterday. Country first, Canada first, but that's never going to happen with her. Don't pull.
So a couple points on that, because I care tremendously about this, and I am going to make the OShow about this issue until it's behind us. Because I mean, like I said to a client the other day, any other issue really doesn't matter if our country gets taken over in any way by the Trump regime. So let's focus on protecting our access to our democracy before we start worrying about its perfections, right? So some of the things that are, people have been asking me, could it ever happen, Laura? I see it as kind of three potentials. I see it as an insidious economic union that starts with a shared currency and then moves into taking over of our banking system, and then eventually taking over who gets invested in, et cetera, the oligarch way. I see that as a very real possibility, because technically we're not giving up our sovereignty, as O'Leary was careful to say. But you know what? When the U.S. gets our money, really, we lose our sovereignty. The second thing is that idea that you just brought up, which is there's a fracture. Right? There's always been a north-south orientation with Alberta anyway. And I grew up in Quebec during the time of the first referendum with René Lévesque and all of that stuff. So I'm very familiar with the idea of breaking away from Canada and all that entails. But if you see a fissure on the West Coast and the rise of the Bloc on the East Coast or in Quebec, there is a real possibility of breaking apart the Federation of Canada. There's already a Wexit movement. It's already in play. And they're ready, I think that there would be an appeal to that, which is why when Elizabeth May in her press conference and then subsequently in the OShow, we talked about the fact that, California, come on over to Canada. I mean, if that's the game we're playing, then let's shift the map, right? So, I mean, I think we have to realize that there's already been ground laid for the breaking up of Canada. And we are vulnerable because, a house divided falls. So we have to be very, very careful about that. I don't dismiss it out of hand at all. And that's why I think Chrétien's Ode to Canada on his 91st birthday resonated with so many people, because he fought for Canada to stay together back in the day on the second referendum. And people wanted to hear an elder statesman say, yes, our country can stay together. Here's how we fight. Here's how we, like Elizabeth May said on the last OShow, we need to get our global partners involved. Canada is not, on an island. We have all kinds of connections and supports. Let's start to leverage them. So I think that leaders who are talking about strategy and leveraging our strengths are what Canada needs very powerfully right now. The third option is one I don't even want to put in the universe. If military action can't be ruled out in Greenland and Panama, what's to say that won't be on the table on some future dystopic nightmarish moment with Trump with Canada? And there's little we could do if it were. So I think it's extremely important that Canadians take this. We're not like at the top of the DEFCON chart, but we're certainly on that chart, and we need to look at it seriously. Keith, you've got more wisdom than I do. I don't want to speak for Mark.
I doubt that.
Where's your radar? No, where's your radar with this? Because everyone's asking, are we really at a threat level in this country, or is this just bullshit bravado barking by Trump?
No, it's more than bullshit bravado. I mean, it is that, but it's more. I mean, he is serious, and he made it obviously serious when he talked about, perhaps using military force if necessary to take Greenland and the Panama Canal. And he made the reasons for that, but he wouldn't do that to our nice neighborly friends in Canada. We'd just use economic force. That's a real bloody threat, and 25% tariffs are a pretty solid example of that. If he does proceed with that level of tariff rate across the board, it's scary as hell. You just outlined several scenarios into how easily Canada could be broken up politically, and I mean, it'll start with the sale of you're bang on. It'll start with the sale of the currency. Well, with common North American currency, it just make more sense. Well, maybe, okay, and then the banks. Well, it was the Canadian banks that survived the recession in 2008 because of Mark Carney's policies. He wouldn't let them do the derivatives and all that other horse shit. So let's keep that in mind. So maybe we get your banks. You come up and have 5 or 6 national banks. See how that works for you. It works well for us. Counter some stuff like this. But the reality is we could be undermined. I found something yesterday or the day before on X that quite frankly stunned me. It's a new site, New Scotia exit. And it's for Nova Scotians who want to exit Canada. And they had the little tartan up over them. Very cute. Now, hopefully there's no more than 5 or 6 of these people in all of Nova Scotia. But if they're starting to organize, someone's putting this shit out there already to start organizing this kind of stuff. Hey, if you feel that, you'd be happier as an American, and who wouldn't, quite frankly, other than the guns, and I like guns. Why wouldn't you? Like, if they're starting this dissension now, Nova Scotia exit. This is not something I've ever heard a neighbor mention around here. Or, everyone seems to, most Canadians have the, have you seen what Trump's done lately kind of view of things, right? It's just like we're watching it awe and wonder and fear, but
Canada
it's not the reality we want.
Canada is under a coordinated attack.
Yes,
You're
absolutely.
under a coordinated communication attack. This is an organized propaganda campaign. People really need to understand that.
Yes.
It has the roots in its rhetoric from going back years. And if you followed US politics and some of the conservative conventions and some of their big talkers, they've been talking about taking Canada for a while. Now that we see these Brexit and this Wexit and this, Scotia exit and these different kind of things coming up, they're giving a permission structure to challenge our very federal government. Our very nature as a country is under communication campaign propaganda threat. So we are not just going to see it about Nova Scotia. We're going to see it in every province. We are going to see the zone flooded with so much bullshit that it's going to take screaming on the OShow and everywhere else that we can just to stop people from being gaslit by it. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is what I track for a living, and it is coordinated. And when you see Elon Musk supporting Pierre Poilievre, how is Poilievre even a possibility as the next prime minister? I don't understand how any Canadian who is paying attention to the propaganda to rip apart our country, to the propaganda that we're hearing about the country we love, and knowing that one of the people who is as close to the center of all of that is Elon Musk, who is also talking about elections in Germany and in the UK. If you don't take that and say, we have to do everything we can to gird against this threat, at very least the propaganda, let alone any actions, the language enough can do severe damage when they have all of the megaphones in the world now, right? So Canadians, please do not underestimate the threat to our country. The communication campaign alone could do severe damage, let alone any kind of other economic or military force. And
they don't need military. They don't need military because they're winning the war on communications. And if Trump breaks this economy with tariffs, people are going to say maybe it makes sense, right? If things get so bad here financially and they break us, you could see people go, you know what? Maybe it makes sense to have some kind of union. We're being punished. I'm not making my economy's ground to a halt. This is why you have Doug talking about spending $40 billion to keep us going. Like, people need to, like you said it, wake the fuck up. Like, oh my God, the oligarchy is kicking down all the ladders, and we're like, hey, I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm cool with that. I want on that train. And then all of a sudden, we're going to end up with this moment where we go, what the fuck did we do? And I don't understand it. This is not partisan. This is not about politics. It's about the power grab, the oligarchy power grab that is being facilitated by other people who want to be in the oligarchy, who want to kick down all the ladders. for anyone else to succeed in this society, to control every aspect of our lives through communication and through, and military is a joke. They don't need it. Like, I don't wake up. And I will, I mean, you know,
well, guys, I don't want to.
I'm going to fight. I will fight. I will
Right.
absolutely. If it's the end of me, I know that sounds,
No.
you know, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm not, like, I'm fucking serious. Like, you know what? And I know it'll be futile, but
I told them, no, it's not futile, though. It isn't futile. I've told Elizabeth May that my teenagers are actually talking about fighting in the real sense, right?
Yeah.
Like they're watching this shit and they're like, do we have to join the army? What is going to happen? So I hope it never gets to that, but it's not futile when it's communications. All it takes is effort, truly. Because yes, they have a lot of control. Facebook, X, I'm not suggesting that we have a platform that anywhere compares to anything that Elon or Zuckerberg could do. But the one thing I do know is that there's a whole lot of effort that hasn't started yet, right? So just like I'm not going to look at any polling before Carney got in the race when it comes to what's going to happen with our country in terms of the next federal election, I am not going to cede the narrative to the oligarchy in the United States until Canadians start to wake up and speak the fuck up. Keith?
Well, that's the only way it's going to happen, work out best for Canada. But the sad reality is Musk in particular has a lot of fanboys in Canada and around the world, quite frankly.
Doug Ford gave him a $100 million contract for the internet.
Yeah, for something that we could have had for like 40 million, apparently. So it's just insane. And it's scary as hell. I mean, Bezos at the Washington Post has said he was just getting a little unclear as to what the editorial cartoons could be. So no Trump editorial cartoons. What president has never had a daily mocking by an editorial cartoonist? That's part of the gig, and sometimes it's the most communicated part of the gig. For just stunning. So here's a guy that owns one of the most high circulation newspapers in the world. No editorial cartoons. Not only not critical, just none. Just make it clear, because it could be subjective whether it's critical or not. No Trump, for God's sakes. Now that's him. Now we've got.
Because the dictator doesn't like to be mocked. The dictator doesn't like to be mocked. Obama mocked him during the press gallery dinner back in 2009, 08? And here we are. So yeah, Trump does not like to be mocked. But you know what? We can't do too much about Trump, but we sure as hell, Canada, can do a lot about who's going to lead our fight against Trump. And whether that is provincially or federally, we have options still. So please do not just hang it up and think that, oh, it'll be better in America. I had a business guy ask me, well, would we get compensation if they took us over? I'm like, oh, yeah, because that's what autocrats do. When they take you over, they give you a big fat thank you check. It ain't going to happen. This isn't going to be good for anyone in Canada. Even if you don't care about their gun problems and you don't care about all their other shit, it ain't going to be good for us because they don't owe us a thing if they take us. So please get that shit out your brains. Anyone want to end with a last comment here? What can we do?
Well, our core identity seems to be, other than we're not American, our core identity seems to be national health care. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that would be gone if we were to accept this United States, because the insurance companies in Canada would be all about joining the U.S. system for non-paying of medical patients, right? We would have bankruptcies, medical bankruptcies in Canada, just like they do in the States. Then shortly after that, we would have the problems with the guns and the, school shootings, and we can import all that stuff gradually over time. But right off the bat, it'd be a disaster for Canada, and that's just the healthcare system would be gone. People. We all know this is a core of our identity. It's not something the Americans will ever, ever be able to get their heads around, just like they can't get their heads around gun control in a reasonable sense. They can't get it around national health care either with a single payer system. The rest of the world's worked this out. These are just two real key reasons why Canada can never, ever become a 51st or the 51 through 60th state. Just not.
I think that's why Canadians resonated so much when the first thing out of Carney's mouth when he was asked by Jon Stewart was, bottom line, it's not going to happen. And then he made the joke, it's not you, it's us, which made it very charming. frankly, I think that if we did have a negotiator in front of Trump, Trump would respect Carney because he likes a successful person, right? Poilievre doesn't have the resume that would get Trump any kind of success or any kind of respect. So if it is about standing up and fighting back respectfully, charmingly, I think Carney is our best shot with that particular narcissist in the White House. Mark?
Well, I think you asked what can be done, and I think I think Europe is giving us a good example of what can be done. They are starting to decouple themselves from a reliance on the United States. They're starting there's lots of calls for Europe to create and invest in its own defense army and stop relying on the States, to make new economic arrangements with like countries. And I think Canada needs to do exactly the same thing. We have always been kind of like this little brother syndrome next to the States. It's worked for us, but we sit on one of the most resource-rich countries in the world.
We stand on it. We stand on it. We don't.
Sorry, I made the mistake. We proudly sit atop the throne of one of the most valuable pieces of resource in the world.
Right.
Everybody is going to want our product. Right. We don't have to sell it to the United States. We can sell it to other countries. So if I'm Carney or Poilievre or whoever becomes the next prime minister, my first order of business is to start creating new economic alliances with like countries. And I think Europe is a perfect example of where we should be focusing more of our attention. And because they've had enough as well. I've had enough of the U.S. bullshit. I've had enough. It's been 20 years of bullshit down there, and I'm done. There's a serious problem in that country, and it's going to implode into a massive class war between the right and the left, and all the people in the middle who are sitting there going, oh, I don't know, are going to get caught in the middle, and it's going to be a shit show, and we don't want any part of that. So let's protect our future by creating new economic alliances and let the U.S. let it self-implode, because that's where it's going.
Well, I hope for the sake of my family who live in the U.S. and who would love to come to Canada, and everybody else down there, all 400 million of our neighbors, however many it is now, I hope it doesn't implode. I don't want to see injustices. I don't want to see people suffer from the oligarchy taking over the world. But I get your point. And when somebody said, we should build a wall against Canada, I'm like, please do, but don't ask Trump to build it because it'll never get built. Like, build a real one. That sounds fucking fantastic. Right? Thanks.
Get with it.
But and I think that's why we need leaders who get it. And I think that Chrétien's letter was well timed. Elizabeth May, if you haven't, who's ever listening or watching to this episode of the Scandal Panel, because you guys are a favorite feature of the OShow, check out the Elizabeth May. I mean, we've had over 4,000 direct downloads, and it hasn't even been a week, because she spoke with clarity and force and humor. And Charlie Angus, a couple of weeks before, did with me as well. Check that one out. There are Canadian leaders who are meeting this moment, who are not ceding ground, who are not saying it's futile, who are not just rolling over, and who sure as hell are not going down to Mar-a-Lago and making deals as though Canadians are a fucking product. All right. So kudos to every leader who is standing up. I'll give a kudos, first ever, maybe last ever, to Doug Ford here on the OShow for standing up for Canada. And let's all fight together to stop this, protect our economy, and to protect the people we care so much about here on this program. There's a polar vortex rolling into Canada. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are living and suffering in homelessness. And it is going to be absolutely brutal. There's no excuse for it. And the last thing we need is to have cruelty running our country, or cruelty in association to the cruelty that's running America right now. We need to stand up for each other, as we always have, Canada, and for our allies. Thanks so much, guys. You're amazing. I think this is a record length of an OShow Scandal Panel. It is raw and uncut. You get what you get. We don't have time for anything fancy anymore. There's too much shit going on in our country. So I don't know who's going to be on the next OShow, and I don't know how soon I'm going to do it, but the way things are going, it's going to be fast. So thank you, Keith Leslie, veteran reporter, and now living on the East Coast. So you're bringing us the perspective, and that scares the crap out of me. Don't go anywhere, Nova Scotia. We love you. We love you. I love Nova Scotia. It's so good down there. And also, of course, Mark Cripps.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow. OShow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the OShow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the OShow. It's the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the OShow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the OShow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the OShow. It's a podcast, the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. Stay informed with the OShow, OShow.
Your merch bin.